All right, folks, we got the perfect guest to kick off tonight's show. Joining us from the Foundation of Freedom Online, which he founded. He's the champion of free speech and the man who helped illuminate all of us about the dangers of the industrial censorship complex. Our good friend, Mike Benz. Mike, good to have you back.
Great to see you, John.
All right, over the last few weeks, we've had a chance to appreciate some of the transparency that President Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and Pam Bondi and particularly Kash Patel have made available to the public. And we get a sense of just how large the Obama-Biden weaponization machinery was. I know you've been reading this. You've done your own great work on this. How bad was this weaponization?
It was unbelievable. And at Just the News, you guys just put up this piece, 10 most important revelations about the Obama-Biden era of weaponization. And it's a fantastic kind of rundown of all of the vast abuses that took place. To me, the thing that sticks out most is still the classified annex and the revelations about the Soros, the Open Society Institute, and their plot to use the critical infrastructure hoax, which ended up turning into CISA at DHS and censorship of the internet in tandem with the George Soros NGOs doing the disinformation. So it all fits together like a glove. I think what Tulsi and Kash have been doing with these revelations around Russiagate and around declassifying classified documents has been amazing, but we are still lacking one very, very critical underside of the semi-classified iceberg, and that is USAID. As folks know, last month the USAID shut down on July 1st. It was absorbed by the State Department, but we still have no revelations. We have more transparency about the CIA and the FBI than we do about the humanitarian aid organization, so-called humanitarian aid organization, USAID. That cannot stand. This White House is flying blind on foreign policy until they actually can reconstruct what was done by previous administrations through USAID.
Yeah, and I remind everybody, USAID was one of the many places that Hunter Biden had his finger in, helping Burisma out, get a relationship there through their different players.
Because Soros has billions of dollars invested in Eurasia, and foreign policy lines, the foreign policy set by the State Department, the intelligence community, the defense sector, and the aid sector goes to pad George Soros's profits. I actually ran an analysis in Brazil.
That's amazing.
George Soros teamed up with USAID in Brazil, and I ran an analysis, and it showed that if Bolsonaro in Brazil had stayed president under the policies of the Bolsonaro administration, his portfolio would have only gone up about $5 million over the 3 years since then. But under the Lula administration, it went up over a quarter of $1 billion because of all of the government mandates that helped Soros companies. For example, Soros has invested in the clean energy space, and Lula, the first thing he did was install these ethanol fuel mandates that all helped Soros portfolio companies. This is the Soros strategy in Ukraine. It's the Soros strategy in Eurasia, in South and Central America. And so you see this partnership between the State Department, USAID, and George Soros at every corner. So in the same way that Harvard is a hedge fund with a university attached, I think the best way to understand the Open Society Institute is a hedge fund with a philanthropy attached. But the fact is I don't believe that Secretary Rubio or President Trump can understand what they are up against in Brazil or in Europe with the EU Digital Censorship Act until they have the USAID files about disinformation, digital resilience, misinformation, media literacy, information integrity. All of these search terms can be immediately run by the Foreign Assistance Branch of the State Department, and they should do a Tulsi style. Here's 85,000 pages worth of documents, the same way Tulsi did it. Let them compete against each other for the best in the business, state versus ODNI.
Yep. Yeah, and FBI, let me tell you, FBI is dropping a lot of stuff. I mean, Tulsi and the FBI have probably revealed more secrets in the last month than we had in the first 8 years of the scandal. It's pretty remarkable. I want to go back to something because it's very important, and you have done this better than anyone. The ability to pull off the Russia collusion story or the Ukraine impeachment story or the Hunter Biden is disinformation story wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't a censorship complex alongside of the actors. So, all right, they're putting out a fake story. And those of us who try to tell the story, we get put out as conspiracy theorists, we get censored, but it wouldn't have been completely achievable if the censorship machine hadn't been put in place. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And not only that, the censorship machine was put in place because of this op. They not only used the censorship to get away with the crime of the century, but they actually used the crime of the century in order to install the censorship, because it was the idea that there's not just a regular ordinary course dispute governed by the First Amendment. This was something special. It was a counterintelligence, national security, just in the same way that typically the government is open and transparent in the sense that you can do FOIAs and find things on usaspending.gov, but when it's classified, you're not allowed to see it.
Right.
This is essentially what they did to speech. And then when Russiagate ran out in the summer of 2019, they transitioned to this democracy predicate, and USAID went on to take so much of the linchpin for that under its democracy promotion capacity. But they used that as that was how the CIA and FBI and DHS and all of their funded, sponsored NGOs took over the trust and safety teams at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Reddit. It was through this idea that there was a Russiagate. So this basically allowed them to get away with
Baker, right? James Baker, the former FBI general counsel, he goes to Twitter, doesn't he? James Baker.
Exactly. It's exactly what he does, and then uses that perch to run the Hunter laptop op while he was also doing the National Task Force for Election Crises. And this was this idea because they used Russiagate to say that elections themselves were critical infrastructure. So therefore, the federal government, rather than the states, could administer elections. And then they said any speech online that impacts elections and contains disinformation is now an attack on critical infrastructure. And so this is how they got to control all speech all year round over this idea that anything impacts the democratic process. And then they went to Brazil and got the judges in charge of elections to be able to censor speech on the basis of, well, that speech might impact an election, so you can't call the president corrupt. Now that's illegal. You can't point out this scandal. They're doing the same thing in Romania, all across the EU. There was a formal State Department USAID strategy to go after EMBs, election management bodies, the courts and judges that decide elections, in order to get them to add censorship to their legal repertoire of what they could nuke from orbit.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, you mentioned it briefly, but it's so important. We got about a minute and a half left. I just want to ask, the FBI knows in advance that Hillary Clinton is going to put this op into place. They know that the FBI is expected to legitimize it by investigating it. That's what the Russians had. That's what the CIA had. The FBI assessed that that information was not disinformation. And then the FBI does it. If the FBI doesn't open up on Hillary Clinton's the Steele dossier or the stuff from Australia, this scandal probably becomes a very different, or probably just a dirty trick that didn't go anywhere, right?
Oh, completely. And they used word games, not the letter or spirit of the law, to get them out of this at every turn. If you remember, this was the same James Comey who they indicted President Trump for, quote, mishandling classified documents. But Hillary Clinton smashed her subpoenaed phones with a hammer and used the so-called bleach bit, destroyed everything while under subpoena. And it was that same James Comey who not only covered up Russiagate, but covered for her by creating a brand new legal standard that would have been illegal under the standard of gross negligence. But he came up with the new legal standard called extreme recklessness, saying it's something less than gross negligence. Extreme recklessness actually sounds a lot worse to me than gross negligence, but if you just simply arose by any other name, is evidently not a crime.
It's amazing. Yeah, and then we learned that he, James Comey, was authorizing classified leaks according to these FBI documents, as was Adam Schiff. And of course, they, like Hillary Clinton, paid no accountability price. Really remarkable. Mike, you are amazing. All the work you do. I can't wait to have you back on again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. And just one last thing. Of all the people you just listed for mishandling classified documents, the only person to ever be charged for it was President Donald Trump.
Isn't it amazing? That's the only one. Yeah.